Hey everyone, Gill Gross here, and it is time for a preview of the 2024 Wimbledon men's semifinals. Ripe with storylines, huh? Medvedev, with the run that he has in front of him, potentially could secure his legacy forever. And when I say that, I just mean he could take it up a notch, go to another level. I mean, look at the fact that he's beaten the world number one, and now he has Alcaraz in front of him, and then he might have Djokovic in the final. I mean, if he pulls this off, that'd be something, no? Alcaraz can win the Channel Double, and he can really signal with back-to-back Wimbledon titles that Wimbledon is going to be an amazing place for him long-term. Obviously, it would be fascinating if that Djokovic-Alcaraz final is reset after last year. Djokovic can show that the first half of 2024 was more of an extended hiccup, win his 25th major, and tie Federer for Wimbledon titles with what would be number 8. Obviously, Lorenzo Musetti here for the first time. So a really intriguing lineup of semifinals, and I'm excited to preview both of them. But first, I want to tell you about CoachLife.com. The traveling coaches on the tennis tour are amazing at what they do. But if I were to be asked who are the most important coaches in the life of a pro player, I'd say the coaches who developed these pro players when they were 10, 12, 15 years old. CoachLife.com is a platform where these masters of tennis development share their secrets. These are the coaches who sculpted the games of players like Swiatek, Goff, Tiafoe, Kyrgios, Fritz, Sampras, Draper, Sharapova, Pegula, Paul, Roddick, Davenport, Shapovalov. They're all on here. Over 300 videos in total and more being added every month. It's such a fantastic resource. My favorite thing to do on CoachLife.com is to sort by category. Of course, if you want to hone in on one specific shot, let's say serve or backhand, you can do that. But there's way more to developing a player than that. I can learn about fitness, nutrition, psychology, coaching, philosophy. There's tons of advice for you tennis parents out there, and I can hold off on that one for now. But this is a great resource for coaches, parents, and players. By clicking on the link and typing the code GG, you get 15% off your subscription for the first 2 years. That's the link in the description and the code GG for 15% off your subscription. I'm going to start with Medvedev versus Alcaraz, but I'm really going to start with Alcaraz versus Tommy Paul, the quarterfinal match that I have not done analysis on, which some of you have been wondering why. I've replied to some comments here and there, but let me say now that the reason I didn't do an analysis on that is because when two matches are happening at one time, I have to make a decision. I can either do a more surface level and potentially less accurate analysis on both, or I can do what I usually do, which is a very thorough, deep analysis on one where I feel really good that I've covered my bases and I have a great grasp on explaining the result for what it is and why it happened. And I prefer the latter. And in this case, Medvedev and Sinner first up on center court, a match that absolutely had me engrossed and fascinated. And they were 2 sets in by the time that Alcaraz and Paul started. And then the Tommy Carlitos match, it went pretty quick. And by the time Sinner Medvedev was done and I had my thoughts together, it was already midway through the 3rd set of Alcaraz Paul. So that's why I didn't get analysis on the channel. That's the only reason. If the scheduling was different, it might have been different. So, and like today, if the Djokovic match happened, then the Musetti-Fritz match might have been not analyzed, but instead it was. Now, I did go back and I fast-forwarded through in between points and I gave it a quick watch. So now I've seen basically every point of the match. And what I'll tell you is, first of all, Alcaraz reached peak confidence and flow in sets 3 and 4. And just as far as level and confidence goes heading into the semifinal, you really can't ask for much better than what we saw from Alcaraz in sets 3 and 4, where I feel like he really was at the peak of his powers. I said in the preview that I had a feeling that Alcaraz was going to be more tactical against Tommy Paul in this match, mostly because Tommy, with the matches that he's played against Alcaraz, had, fully earned Alcaraz's attention and respect. And that's not to say that Carlitos and Juan Carlos Ferrero are not going to respect every opponent, but let's not kid ourselves. There's a little bit of a range here. Like when Alcaraz is playing Layal in the first round, they're not building a master game plan, okay? It's mostly, let's go out there and do our thing. And to a certain extent, also, there's a big difference between Masters and Majors, especially a Masters 1000 like Canada, where you're coming off of vacation post-Wimbledon, and you're really likely focusing on getting certain skills and, you're working on getting your game together at that point in time, where once you're at a major, you're not so much focused on building yourself up physically, making technical tweaks, working on new skills. Like at this point, you're not touching any of that. You're just focused on the opponents in front of you, coming in with the best game plan possible. And you have an extra day as well to think hard about these things, where the Canada Masters 1000 format, at that point, you're playing every day. It's kind of a bang, 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 bang thing. So when I said that it was going to be different, it has nothing to do with Alcaraz not giving 100%, totally busting his butt at a Masters 1000 tournament. Of course he did. It's not taking anything away from Tommy Paul. But as far as the tactics go, you're going to get a whole different vibe in a Wimbledon quarterfinal, especially given the way the previous meetings have gone. And Juan Carlos Ferrero, after the match, actually talked about it to Spanish media. I hit the translate button. He had some interesting things to say. He said they played slower because they felt like whenever Alcaraz was giving Tommy a lot of pace, it was basically feeding into Paul's ability to deliver pace in response. Now, to my eyes, I actually saw Alcaraz go into Tommy's forehand with a ton of pace very often. What I didn't see was that was going to the backhand. Going to the backhand, I felt he slowed it down. He got more slower, focused more on height and width, and that makes a ton of sense. Tommy Paul's backhand is a short and low take back. It is a brilliant pace absorbing and pace redirecting machine, but it is not a pace generating machine. And that's what you get with Tommy Paul's kind of technique. So slow to the backhand, gun the ball into Tommy's forehand. I felt that was Alcaraz's baseline pattern that he was really looking for, and it worked extremely well for the most part. It was also very clear to me that Tommy is trying to play kind of a 12 out of 10 ground stroke aggression. He is looking to redline his ground stroke aggression against Alcaraz and then ultimately come forward. It's kind of a crush and rush strategy. And I know the term crush and rush is often used for coming in off of a drive return of serve. But in this case, I'm just using it as an all-encompassing term to describe the way Tommy was playing in the first set when he got the better of Alcaraz. He's taking the ball very early. He's hitting it very hard, and he's coming forward and suffocating Alcaraz. But the thing is about that, you expect a consistency trade-off. You expect at some point with Paul hitting as big as he was hitting, is he going to lose control? Is he going to get erratic or sloppy? And that did happen. And that is to be expected. Tommy Paul is not a huge hitter from the back of the court. He's average to slightly above average in terms of his ability to hit big from behind the baseline. And the way he was hitting the ball in the first set, you would never know that. But then as the match progressed and he sort of lost it a little bit, I felt like that was a result of Tommy just trying to go into the red quite a bit. And then the other thing, I love the technique on Paul's serve. I think it's a beautiful delivery, but it needs to help him more in this match if he wants any chance. I mean, the idea that Alcaraz is going to be in almost every return point and Tommy's going to try to beat him like that, that is a daunting thing. I mean, you're talking about the most explosive and athletic baseliner in the world by far. If you're not going to get anything easy or cheap with your serve, you're fighting an uphill battle. And it's a battle that Tommy, I mean, with his athleticism and his skills, it's fun to watch him fight that battle, but ultimately it was a losing battle for Paul. So he needs to get a little bit more out of the serve, ideally. And yeah, that's basically all my thoughts on Carlos Alcaraz versus Tommy Paul. Now let's get into the Medvedev matchup. And of course, Most of you are probably aware of this, but in case there's anybody watching who doesn't know, there is a full analysis on Medvedev Sinner up on the channel, up on the podcast feed, and there is a full analysis of Musetti versus Fritz up on the YouTube channel. And if you're listening on audio, that is going to be attached to the back of this semifinal preview. Medvedev versus Alcaraz head-to-head is 4-2 Alcaraz. Their first meeting was Wimbledon 2021. It's one I kind of throw in the garbage. I throw it away because Alcaraz was 75 in the world, actually needed a wild card just to get into the main draw of Wimbledon. Since then, Alcaraz is 4-1 against Medvedev. Last year's U.S. Open semifinal is the one win for Daniil. And I think it's important to note that all 4 of Alcaraz's wins are in straight sets. Blowouts at last year's Wimbledon and Indian Wells. And Alcaraz beat Medvedev on the fastest indoor hard court in the sport, Turin, 6-4, 6-4. Didn't even need tie breaks. Medvedev wasn't at his best at that time of the year. I think he was really burnt out. But still, fast indoor hard court, Alcaraz got a straight set win. So as much as 4-2, the number, the head-to-head, it doesn't scream one-sidedness and lopsidedness. I gotta say, if you kind of read between the lines of this head-to-head, it's been solidly tilted towards Alcaraz. And if that U.S. Open match went differently, we'd be saying this is a matchup nightmare for Medvedev. That would be the narrative around this. So it's only one match away from that. That said, I think it's also important to note that Medvedev is playing really differently right now. Alcaraz, particularly at Wimbledon and Indian Wells, feasted on the serve and volley. By the way, he feasted on serve and volley against Medvedev at the U.S. Open too. I like to really emphasize that. He still lost the match because of different things that happened in the match, baseline dynamics, serving dynamics, but Alcaraz serve and volley has been really successful in the head-to-head. The +1 drop shot has been really successful in the head-to-head. And also Alcaraz's superior explosive baseline power in slow conditions has been significant. We've also seen a more patient version of Alcaraz at times against Medvedev, which has kind of enabled Carlitos to just play a much cleaner game against Medvedev. But I think a Daniil who's being more imposing from the back of the court, who is returning from closer in to try to take away the serve and volley and the serve +1 drop shot, and even to some extent the serve +1 approach. He has shifted things in his game that should shift the equation of this head-to-head. And with that, I'll get to what Medvedev, I think, needs to do in order to win the match. The aggression that he showed against Jannik Sinner must be maintained. He must do the same exact thing. Playing slow, playing patient is not the way against Alcaraz. You cannot be passive. He will tear you apart if you give him time, and he will tear you apart if you give him position, meaning you can't really retreat against Alcaraz. He's too good at finishing short in the court, off the ground with his drop shot, with the volley, best drop volleys in the world right now, especially, Nadal, if you want to count him. He will eat you up if you don't mind your court position. The other aspect of this is the serve, because the U.S. Open match between Medvedev and Alcaraz is the only match where Medvedev had a discernible serve superiority. Statistically, that is 100% true. You can look at the Indian Wells match. You can go back to that analysis when they played at Indian Wells this year. Medvedev had no serve advantage. You can go back to Wimbledon last year and Indian Wells the year before, no serve advantage. I don't quite remember how it went down in Turin. I don't. But I have a feeling it was a similar deal. The U.S. Open, Medvedev got way more free points. I think Daniil needs that. I don't think he can really outplay Alcaraz from the back of the court consistently for 3 out of 5 sets. I don't. So I think his serve needs to give him help, just like I said moments ago that Tommy Paul's serve needed to give him help. As for Alcaraz, I think there are some interesting things he can do in response to the new Medvedev return position. It's going to be fascinating. The first thing is I don't think he should get completely scared off of serve and volley like Sinner got totally scared off of serve and volley. Like Jannik saw Medvedev stand in and literally didn't even try it. He barely tried it. He threw it in the garbage as soon as Medvedev changed his return position. I wouldn't be so quick to do that. It's not like Daniil is hugging the baseline with his return position. He's far back enough that you can try to use it as a tactic and see how it goes. And I think it's something that Alcaraz should mix in. But I also think that the typical response to Medvedev standing in is to serve his body. And I think it's a really, it's a serve that Alcaraz probably hits on grass better than any other serve. On a high bouncing surface, I'd say it's the angled kick serve on the ad side. But I think on a surface like this, if I were building a serve strategy for Alcaraz, I might tell him, not every time, obviously, but I might tell him maybe half the time to hit the serve as hard as you can right into the middle of the box. So ramp up the speeds, which Alcaraz can do. Reach back for 130 and above. And if he does that, like he'll hit 133, he'll hit 135, he can bomb it. I would suggest that Alcaraz bombs the serve middle of the box and see how Daniil handles that. Because ultimately, he's still not a player who is maybe as used to and as comfortable with reacting quickly to big first serves as, he has spent his entire career almost on the back fence. So I would test that if I were Alcaraz. The other thing that I think Alcaraz will do, which is something that he's been working on all year long with Juan Carlos Ferrero. It's a correction to what he was doing, poorly oftentimes last year and the start of this year, is don't give unnecessary pace in trading. Use variety to earn the weak ball. When you earn the weak ball, then you can crush it. Then you can go after it. Let your arm go. But hitting the ball hard at Medvedev with no intention is not a good idea. And he is going to Pikachu you. He is going to, like Tommy Paul's backhand, he is going to take that pace and he's going to use it to his own benefit. This was the mistake that Alcaraz made at the U.S. Open, where he was blasting every single ball, which was shocking because he had played Medvedev so patient at Indian Wells earlier that year. It was also a mistake that Alcaraz made at the Australian Open against Zverev in January, blasting every ball, particularly into Zverev's backhand. So he just had practice with it against Tommy Paul, and he needs to do a similar thing again. What I think is going to determine this match, what I think is going to tip the scales in this match, is actually Alcaraz's defense, his end-range scrambling, which I think is going to be the biggest problem for Medvedev if Daniil wants to take charge offensively. If he wants to go after his forehand, if he wants to come forward more, it's going to be Alcaraz's speed that I think is going to make Medvedev a little bit uncomfortable, force him into some errors in the midcourt, force him into some tough volleys and potentially some botched volleys, and extend into errors. Force forecourt difficulty. This is what Sinner couldn't do without strong legs. By the way, I need to follow up on some of the things I said about Sinner in that last video. We have more information now. So another time I will. But look for Alcaraz's defense to come up clutch in some big moments where he's able to steal some points from losing positions when Medvedev is in charge, when he is inside the court, when he has something ripe to attack. Look for Alcaraz to steal some points in that situation, because although Medvedev is coming forward more, he is think about the 2 serve plus 1 forehand misses that happened against Sinner in the second set tiebreak. Those will creep into Medvedev's game. So if you are able to be a good enough retriever, if you're able to give him a high volume of balls and make it really difficult to finish, Those are the kind of misses that you're going to get if you force Medvedev to generate with his forehand. The second serve dynamics are also better for Alcaraz. I think this is key. He is going to go full court press on the second serve return against Medvedev, because if there's one part of Daniil's game that has looked shaky from time to time in the last couple of years, and certainly looked shaky in his quarterfinal against Sinner, it is his second serve. On the other hand, Carlos is doing a really good job hitting harder second serves on the grass. This is an adjustment that he made at Wimbledon last year, and he's making it again this year. Alcaraz's second serve speeds are really high, and he is willing to ditch the kick serve. Not that he never hits the kick serve, but he's not hitting it every time. He's actually mixing up his second serves, making it really hard for his opponents to get a feel and a rhythm for the timing of attacking Alcaraz's second serve. I think the second serve dynamics really favor Alcaraz. That, along with the defense, I think are the two big keys for Carlitos, and I'm picking Alcaraz in 4. Moving on to Djokovic versus Musetti. Unfortunately, Novak won't be upset about it, but unfortunately for us fans and unfortunately for the tournament, Novak gets a withdrawal against de Minaur. Very sad for Alex. Can be tricky for Novak having so many days off. I wonder how he's going to manage that, or exactly what he's going to do, because you want to try to stay in rhythm. You want to try to stay in the flow of things. What is it, 4 days off for Novak? 3? Is it 3 or 4? I'm not sure. Anyway, head-to-head against Musetti is 5-1 Novak. All of the clay meetings, 4 of them, have been tricky. Musetti won one of them in Monte Carlo. Lorenzo has had a 2-0 lead at Roland Garros, and he's also had a 2-1 lead at Roland Garros, which was just a month ago. In general, what have these clay court meetings looked like? Djokovic has had trouble point shortening and finishing, so he ends up in these physical baseline slogs, and Musetti has done really well backhand to backhand with his variety. So Novak's been a little bit shaky in the rally tolerance department, and sometimes it's taken him a while to get his feet under him and just get a grip on these matches. But the end of these matches have been quite dominant. I mean, the fifth sets have been, one was a retirement. This year it was dominant. Musetti never came all that close to winning these matches. On hard court, meanwhile, they've played twice, and the sets are as follows: 6-3, 6-3, 6-0, 6-3. Dubai and Paris, one-way traffic for Djokovic. Better serving conditions, easier penetrating conditions. That has made all the difference for Novak, where he can use his serve firepower, and essentially Musetti's defense isn't such a big problem. So that's interesting. I think that's informative a little bit when it comes to this matchup. Let's start with Musetti and what challenges he can bring to the table. Well, a lot of what I said about de Minaur in my quarterfinal preview applies to Musetti. He tests Djokovic in a way that Novak hasn't really been tested yet, because Novak's offense in his previous 2 matches against Popyrin and Holger Rune has cut through like a knife through microwaved butter. Okay, there has not been a lot of resistance. Popyrin, because defensively and movement-wise, he is not really all that great. And Rune, because he was just so utterly attackable with the way he was playing. Musetti is elite defensively. So the quick and easy offense and the dominant serve effectiveness that Novak has used is not likely to be there. I mean, Musetti has stood up to the serves in the last 2 rounds of Giovanni Impecci-Pericard and Taylor Fritz, 2 massive bomb serves that Musetti, if you look at percentage of return points won against those serves, Lorenzo has fared extraordinarily well. So he will make Djokovic, even though it's grass, it's the same thing that we talked about on clay. He will make Djokovic play more physical baseline rallies and do more running. We haven't really seen that. Maybe in the second round a little bit against Fernley, but let's be honest. We haven't really seen Djokovic have to play too physical. So this will be potentially something that Musetti can use to gain a foothold or gain an advantage in the match. Djokovic, however, has the skills to deal with this defense, with the defensive prowess and the variety that Musetti brings to the table. And a lot of this will kind of be building off of the things that I talked about in the Fritz versus Musetti post-match video, which if you're listening on audio, you haven't heard yet. But I think net rushing is massive here. I think it's going to be enormous. Serve and volley should be in the playbook. Approaching off of any short block return is going to be a must for Djokovic. There's got to be a depth threshold. If it's too deep in the court, Novak might have to hit an aggressive +1 and stay back. But if it is short, he needs to come in to not let Musetti neutralize. The short drawing slice that Musetti loves to hit, Novak is probably often going to meet that ball with a slice approach. Oh, you're going to draw me in? Fine by me. I know how to keep a slice low because my slice is excellent, and I'm confident in my transition game and my volleys. So I will take that happily if you're Novak Djokovic. And sometimes if it isn't too low, he might even be able to hit over the ball and come forward. The goal for Novak is that instead of Musetti extending points with slice defense like he did against Fritz, he'll force Musetti, when he's running into corners, to drive passing shots on the run. That's lower percentage. That's where Musetti is going to not be able to really work his magic. So on every attacking ball and every opportunity, you're in and you're forcing Musetti to hit a passing shot. He's going to hit some great ones, but it's a heck of a lot better than letting Lorenzo run side to side and eventually turn the point around. That's what he's so good at. Because I talk about his slice defense, but then every once in a while he'll find a chance to take a rip and turn the point around from deep in the court with his excellent power. There are also more and better ground stroke options for Djokovic against the slice. He is a great low ball hitter, and he's had to develop this, particularly on this surface. I mean, look at Roger Federer and what Federer used to always look to do against Novak. Roger loved the backhand slice, low cross court, make Djokovic hit up on the ball, draw him inside the baseline, and then attack with the drive with a compromised Novak positionally. Federer loved that play. So what Djokovic needed to do was get pretty good at keeping that backhand from a low contact deep in the court, learning how to get the feet up to it, get the legs down to it, and try to hit a quality ball off of it. I expect Djokovic sometimes off of that cross-court slice to actually change with an aggressive backhand down the line, which is not something that Taylor Fritz did. So full stop. And we've talked about Djokovic re-slicing and the option that he has there already. But Djokovic is just going to deal with the slice better than most players. I also think Novak should drop shot the drop shotter. Is anybody seeing how far back Musetti is defending from? Like, it's nuts, okay? Nobody has taken advantage of this. Nobody. You got to drop shot Musetti. He is so far back. And, Fritz did. I do feel like every time Taylor Fritz drop shotted, it was telegraphed. Musetti got a great jump on it. The execution wasn't that good. Lorenzo is crazy fast. He does have blazing speed. But I think Novak being a little bit more clinical with it, having better disguise, setting it up better, I think the drop shot can pay dividends. And then the other thing, I talked about this obviously with Medvedev to Alcaraz. I think it's also going to be a thing with Musetti Novak and the second serve. Musetti's second serve was getting hammered by Fritz. That's a cue for Novak. Novak is going to see that. He's going to say, if Taylor can, I certainly can. And I expect Djokovic to lace second serve returns deep into Musetti's backhand. I mean, deep middle, essentially. And it's okay if it goes to the forehand. But I think it's especially hard for Musetti to deal with that ball when it comes hard at his backhand and he has to kind of half volley I mean, he's pretty good at improvising and at least getting it back in the court, but still. My prediction, pretty simple. Musetti has been able to frustrate opponents with his retrieval skills and his ability to turn defense to offense and make players play a ton of extra balls, which is more opportunities for them to mess it up and make errors. Djokovic is attacking. It's too varied. It's too clinical. It's too consistent. I don't think playing great defense on a grass court is a path to beating Novak Djokovic. I don't think it's enough. Maybe, look, sometimes Musetti has had success with the serve +1 in this tournament. And, so I don't want to paint him as just this fully defensive guy. Obviously, he will take his opportunities to attack. But of course, against a returner like Djokovic and the serve level of Musetti, I don't think he's going to get all that many great chances to be offensive behind his serve. So I do think Musetti's going to have to play a lot of defense. And I see Djokovic getting in a good position, hitting great approach shots, knocking volleys off all day and night, finishing with drop shots. I think it's going to be too much for Musetti. You also have to wonder if the moment is going to get too big. This is getting really real for Lorenzo. This is, similar maybe to like the Denis Shapovalov spot from a few years back where Denis was your surprise semifinalist and he struggled to perform in that match when he went up against Novak Djokovic. So far, Musetti has been good mentally, but this is a big spot. And by the way, he was atrocious in the first set against Fritz. Like the jitters really overcame him. He played a terrible set with a capital T. So we've already seen Musetti get a little bit of stage fright in this tournament, and you do have to worry about that happening as well. Whereas Novak, it's only another Friday. My pick is Djokovic in 3. Hope you enjoy these semifinals, everybody, and hope you enjoyed this. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next time.